we're going to go ahead and shift into what everybody is here for, and that is commentary on what's going on across the NBA. There really hasn't been much. There was summer league stuff going down, which I didn't really pay too much attention to. In the summertime, I kind of just turn off from watching basketball unless it's like Hardwood Classics or something, just because I spend 9 months out of the year, or like 8, 9 months out of the year, watching basketball like every night. This is the time for me to go and consume other types of media, watch movies, catch up on TV shows, catch up on, you know, video games, this, that, whatever. But that doesn't mean I totally stray away from the news cycle, okay? I keep abreast, especially with all of this that's going down with Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. It's just, you can't totally detach from it, especially when you're somebody like myself who enjoys making content about this type of stuff. It's just you can't turn it off. You cannot turn it off. With that, the biggest story, I guess, that's come out recently is that the Utah Jazz are now listening to offers for Donovan Mitchell. Briefly was, I don't want to say untouchable, but they went ahead, they shifted Rudy Gobert, which I did a video on, and I went ahead and I bloviated about for like 10 minutes or whatever. And that was effectively, I think, the sign that Utah is ready to start the next chapter of their franchise, because Quinn Snyder's gone, Rudy Gobert's gone, and now, even though Utah really wasn't a championship contender with Gobert, now that they don't have Gobert, their opportunity to really have a successful run in the Western Conference is effectively no longer. I love Donovan Mitchell, but to trade away Rudy Gobert and not get somebody back of similar caliber it does not bode well for their short-term ambitions. Of course, they got Malik Beasley, who's a good young player. They got a whole bunch of draft picks as well, which will hopefully pan out nicely for them. But that was it effectively. It's like, okay, well, Ryan Smith or whoever the fuck the GM is effectively like, okay, well, time to move on. And with that, reports have begun to circulate that the Jazz are potentially in the market to move Donovan Mitchell. And this story is courtesy of Sports Illustrated. Reports have come from Shams, Woj, all these, different people. But this report is a week old. This broke while I was on vacation. So stuff I'm sure has, transpired, but nothing sizable. I know the Heat have been mentioned. The Knicks have been mentioned alongside or in the hunt for Donovan Mitchell, but let's go ahead and blow through this really quick. At one point during the NBA offseason, Donovan Mitchell was untouchable in trade discussions. However, according to ESPN's Woj, the Jazz have reportedly shown desire to engage with teams in possible trade scenarios for Utah's franchise player. The latest reported news about Mitchell and the Jazz comes 3 days after general manager Justin Zanuck told reporters that the three-time All-Star was not, quote, untouchable in the league's free agency period, saying that, quote, change is inevitable in the NBA. I'm not trying to be cryptic or anything, but Donovan Mitchell is on our roster, and he's a very, very important part of what we're trying to do, said Zanuck to ESPN's Tim McMahon. Things evolve in the NBA, so I couldn't sit here and say anybody is untouchable. We're trying to build a championship team, but there's no intent there to trade Mitchell at all. Well, that's obviously a lie now, but just when it comes to the ideas of players being untouchable, there are only a select group of players in the NBA who are untouchable, and it's like the S tier of NBA player. I'm talking guys like LeBron, Giannis, Jokic, like the upper echelon of NBA stars. And I mean, even that's like kind of unraveled with all of the news surrounding Kevin Durant. Of course, some of this is you don't trade these guys because they're too talented, right? They're the best players in the world, and you're not just going to trade them away unless the offer is so enticing that you can't say no. And another portion, and something that's come to fruition in, the reports about Kevin Durant, is that they're almost untouchable because there is no offer, it seems like, that is good enough to satiate the appetite of the GM who is potentially looking to part ways with this franchise player, because players of the magnitude of LeBron, of Giannis, of Kevin Durant don't get outright traded. It simply doesn't happen. So there's no precedent to see what the appropriate haul is. I mean, more recently, of course, there was Rudy Gobert, and you get 4 draft picks plus Pat Bev plus Malik Beasley, but what does that mean, the asking prices for Kevin Durant? I mean, there have been reports saying that the Nets want an all-star caliber player, a young role player who's ready to make an impact right away, another potential young asset, and then a whole bunch of draft picks. And that is the type of cachet that teams just don't have. Like, NBA teams do not have all of these players lying around. So that's why a lot of the times trades like these don't get done. But guys like Donovan Mitchell, Zach LaVine, Rudy Gobert, DeMar DeRozan, like those kinds of guys are liable to get traded, because although the asking price will be a lot, it is significantly less compared to somebody like Kevin Durant. Per Woj, anything is now possible for Utah after the franchise made the decision to send out Gobert in a blockbuster trade to Minnesota for Beasley, Pat Bev, Jared Vanderbilt, Leandro Balmaro, Walker Kessler, and multiple firsts. Beyond Mitchell, Utah is also open to the idea for other potential trades with players on its roster. I was listening to, I think it was JJ Redick and Alex Caruso on their podcast, and they were talking about Jordan Clarkson being potentially someone to keep an eye on if all of this stuff does transpire with Donovan Mitchell, because Jordan Clarkson, former 6th man of the year, at least if I remember correctly, guy who can give you 15, 16, 17, 18 points off the bench. He is the type of player that championship teams want to add, because he does bring tremendous value off the bench as a scorer, as a very much improved scorer as well. It's like guys like Clarkson and 3-and-D guys are the most sought after types of players when building a championship team. With Gobert in Minnesota and new players joining Utah, it appeared that the Jazz would seek to rebuild around Mitchell and continue to go after an NBA championship. Instead, it appears that more changes could come to the franchise after it began the offseason by hiring new coach Will Hardy. Mitchell reportedly did not shy away from his feelings toward the resignation of his former coach Quinn Snyder, who coached him for all 5 of his seasons with the Jazz. According to Woj, he was, quote, surprised and disappointed by the early June move and was trying to process what it meant for him in the franchise. Last season, under Snyder, Utah fell in 6 games to the Mavericks in the opening round of the NBA playoffs after reaching the conference semis during 2021. The asking price for Mitchell is expected to be expensive, according to Woj. The Quinn Snyder resignation, which is already like almost 2 months old at this point, was something that I did talk about very briefly, but it was surprising, but the reasoning that he gave behind it was one that all too many coaches fall victim to. He felt that he took the team as far as he could, and that at some point, it was no longer going to work. Like, some coaches just get to the end of their usefulness with their franchise, whether it's their game plan hasn't evolved well enough, the team hasn't evolved well enough, both of which are true with Utah. But of course, losing Joe Ingles greatly impacted their offense, and they kind of just stagnated, and Quinn Snyder was ultimately just like, hey, it's time for me to go. I think that I'm done with this team. There's nothing more I can give. And the fact that he gave, I think, like 6 or 7 years with Utah is way longer than most coaches are useful for. It's usually like 3 or 4 years, and if nothing sizable happens after that, the franchise will just get rid of you. But I think I know that it's a testament to how great of a coach Quinn Snyder is. And I don't know if he's still looking for a job. I don't know if, he wants to replace Steve Nash in Brooklyn. I don't know if he wants to maybe go back to being an assistant, but he reached the end of his usefulness with the team. Now, there really haven't been a lot of reports linking any teams to Donovan Mitchell aside from the Knicks, and of course, that's really not too much of a surprise. I forgot my train of thought. I'm trying to find the story about the Heat and the Knicks being involved with Donovan Mitchell. But more so, I really just want to talk about the Knicks, because they've been the only team that has been like actively linked to Donovan Mitchell, maybe because of the New York City connection. I believe he's from Queens. I tried talking about this a couple weeks ago where I can't remember if he was from Queens, he was born in Queens and grew up there, or he was born in Westchester and he grew up in Queens, but either way, he has a close connection to New York City and to Queens in particular. You know, he is an avid Mets fan. there was I forgot. There was this video of a little kid who was talking to Donovan Mitchell. I think it was at a Mets game and just, begging him to come to the Mets, or to come to the Mets, to come to the Knicks. And yeah, we'll see. But the Miami Heat remain focused on their efforts to trade for either Kevin Durant or Donovan Mitchell, with the team prioritizing the former over the latter. That's not necessarily a surprise. If the Heat are successful in trading for either player, it would almost certainly require trading Tyler Hero. Hero is eligible for an extension, and his market is unclear, though it could require a max or a near max. If the Heat don't include Hero in a trade this offseason, there's optimism that they will come to an extension. But I do think that Donovan Mitchell to the Knicks is more feasible, and I think that, it would be the better trade for them. I'm not, the type of guy who's going to sit here and just shit on the Knicks relentlessly, because I'm not going to do that. I'm going to shit on them, but I'm going to shit on them when it's warranted, and I'm also going to give them credit when credit is due. When they made the playoffs last year or 2 years ago, I was very impressed by them. I thought they had a good season. Of course, they failed to live up to it the following season, but shit happens. They overachieved a little bit, and as a fan of a team who overachieved and went to the playoffs a few years ago, I kind of know how it goes. I know there are a lot of people out there who just shit on the Knicks for the sake of doing it because it gets clicks, it's this, that, whatever. I don't like that. I don't like being a disingenuous asshole. If I am going to troll, I'm going to troll, I'm going to troll just to be funny. I'm going to troll because it's warranted, and I'm going to troll in a matter where we can all have a good laugh about it. But I think that the Knicks are very seriously considering trading for Donovan Mitchell. And I'm saying that baselessly. I don't have any information to back that up. I'm not an insider. I'm just a guy speculating on the internet. But I look at this Knicks roster, and I see Jalen Brunson, who I think was a very good signing for them. I see R.J. Barrett, who I think is a good young player. I see Obi Toppin, who's a good young player. You have Quickly, Quentin Grimes. You still do have Julius Randle for the time being, even though they may try to move him elsewhere. You still have Mitchell Robinson. The Knicks have a very good young team. However, their floor with Donovan Mitchell is higher than their current ceiling. I do not look at this team and see a franchise player. I don't believe that Brooklyn, I don't believe that New York has a franchise player. I thought they would, drafting RJ Barrett out of Duke. I still think that he is a good player. I think that he can fit well on a mid-tier playoff team, but it's been 3 years. He's been in the league for 3 years. He just averaged 20 points, 6 boards, and 3 assists. I don't know if he's going to make some incredible leap this year, because he hasn't yet. Every year has been incrementally better. But at this rate, if he maintains this level of production, he is not going to be their franchise player. He will not be able to be a number one on a contending team. And I think that that's kind of the consensus among, people who cover the Knicks, among Knicks fans, is that at this point, RJ Barrett is a good number 2, a really good number 3, and someone who does make your team better. But how much better is the question? Of course, there are still a lot of questions concerning him, and mainly it's his perimeter shooting. I think that if he does, go back to 2 years ago and shoot at like 38, 39, 40%, which he has done in the past, I think it drastically opens his game. But I don't know if his ceiling is what it was coming out of Duke. Donovan Mitchell is already better than RJ Barrett and will maintain a higher level of production than RJ Barrett will. Of course, the Knicks still run into the same issue that they have if they keep RJ Barrett as their number 1, and it's the fact that they still have to surround Barrett or Mitchell with guys who will be able to maximize them. Trading for Donovan Mitchell, which is going to be a sizable package, which I do think the Knicks will have to part with a couple of their young guys, whether it be RJ Barrett and Mitchell Robinson, or whether it be Emmanuel Quickly and Obi Toppin. Utah is going to look at those 4 guys and maybe throw Quentin Grimes in there as well. Utah is going to look at those 5 guys and pick and choose who they want to bring back. And I do think that RJ Barrett is going to be at the top of their list because he is the best of these young players. Now, let's say they do trade for Donovan Mitchell and they trade RJ Barrett. I didn't realize I was gonna have to do the salaries. But let's say that just for all intents and purposes, they trade Evan Fournier to make the salaries work. They trade RJ. You know what? Fuck it. Let's actually go to the trade machine. I'm over here looking like a big dumb stupid idiot, man, and I have the power of the ESPN trade machine. So let's go ahead. We're gonna add the Knicks. Where are we? We're gonna add Utah, and we're gonna see if we can't make this work. Donovan Mitchell, $30 million contract. So right away we are trading. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna give the Knicks a little bit of credence here. I'm going to offload Julius Randle for them because the Julius Randle contract is one that I think Knicks fans despise even more than Evan Fournier because it's longer and it's for more money. So now, how do we complete this trade? Well, we're going to throw in RJ Barrett. We're also going to throw in, I'll throw in Emmanuel quickly as well. Figure a couple picks just to make the salaries work. Now, there is going to have to be someone to make the salaries work. I think that Jared Vanderbilt, good enough, gets traded just to, make sure that the salaries match. So we're going to try this trade. This trade is successful. Okay, so the Knicks get Donovan Mitchell. They get Jared Vanderbilt. What does this roster look like now? So they still have Obi Toppin, I think. I forgot who I traded. Yes, okay. God, I'm so fucking stupid. They still have Mitchell Robinson. They still have Jericho Sims. They still also have Jalen Brunson, who I think is going to be critical for them going forward because he is going to operate as their number 2 for the time being. So now, where are you at? Well, if you're the Knicks, you are now effectively the Utah Jazz East because you have Donovan Mitchell, you have Mitchell Robinson, who is just a non-French Rudy Gobert at this point, and then you have a good crop of young players. You're still going to need, I'd say another 3-and-D guy just because you can't have enough of those. Maybe you try to finesse Jordan Clarkson as well. Maybe you say, hey, fuck it. Let's just, take everybody from the Jazz. You throw Jordan Clarkson in there. Am I dumb? Is Jordan Clarkson not even on the Jazz? Okay, fuck it, whatever. So, fuck Jordan Clarkson. Pardon me. Not actually fuck Jordan Clarkson. I think Jordan Clarkson's a fine player. Okay, so just disregard, just forget that I even fucking mentioned Jordan Clarkson. But that's who you're going to have to try and bring on, a Jordan Clarkson type player. And now, I think that the greater question is, where does this put you in regards to being a contender? Because you have Jalen Brunson now. Okay, and Jalen Brunson is like, what, 24, 25? Something like that. He was born in 96. Okay, so he'll be 26 this year. He'll be 26 in August. You have Donovan Mitchell, who's born in 95, so he's going to be 27. Or I think he's either 26 or going to be 27. So your trajectory is pushed forward a little bit, but you still don't have a complete team. I think that the Knicks with Donovan Mitchell and Jalen Brunson is good enough to be the 5th best team in the Eastern Conference. But the Eastern Conference is so good that they realistically could be as high as number 4 or as low as like 8 or 9 because you have Charlotte. You have Atlanta, who's going to be very good this year with DeJounte Murray. Of course, you have Miami. You have Brooklyn. You have Milwaukee. You have Boston, who's going to be top 3. You have Philly. Like, Milwaukee, the top half of the Eastern Conference, I think, is effectively already decided between Miami, Milwaukee, Brooklyn, Miami. Between Brooklyn, Miami, Milwaukee, Philly, Boston. Like, I think that those 5 teams are going to be the 5 best teams in the Eastern Conference. It's just a matter of where they're going to be. Because all of them are talented enough. All of them have good enough teams to be the number 1 seed. But injuries happen. bad luck happens, losing streaks happen, like, and then, throw Atlanta in there. I think Atlanta has a chance to be like a top 3 team as well. But ultimately, I think the short-winded way of what I'm trying to say here is that yes, the Knicks can and they should trade for Donovan Mitchell. I feel that they should do that. But if it happens, I hope that they have the foresight to have other deals in place with Mitchell being the contingency plan. Because you don't want to bring in Donovan Mitchell and not have any other deals lined up, and then you've effectively just wasted a year of him, because you lose all your leverage in that situation. Because teams know that you're going to be in a mad rush to complement Donovan Mitchell adequately, and they're going to use that over you. They're going to use that to make sure that they give you the least advantageous deal possible. So I'm thinking that behind closed doors, the Knicks and the Jazz come to an informal agreement on a package for Donovan Mitchell. And then the Knicks go out and they sniff around and they see if they can get any other deals facilitated before that. So that way, Leon Rose or whoever's doing the transaction can go back to Justin Zanuck and be like, okay, we have our other guys. Let's make this happen. The only thing that I feel, though, is that is a lot of manpower. That is a lot of brain power to facilitate multiple deals at once. And I just wonder if, again, the degree of difficulty of trading for somebody like Donovan Mitchell, if that is the cause of everything eventually just falling apart. But long story short, I like Donovan Mitchell. I think he fits well with New York. Even if you were to take him and you were to transplant him onto this team as it is, which is impossible, it will not happen, I think that he fits in perfectly well. Because the Knicks this summer, they went out and they filled their biggest hole, which was not having a legitimate point guard. They had guys who could handle the ball. They had RJ Barrett. They have Evan Fournier. They have Julius Randle, but Julius Randle is, more of like a point forward, if that. But they never had a legitimate point guard. But now they do. Jalen Brunson is a legitimate floor general who can command the team in a half court. And that is not in Donovan Mitchell's wheelhouse. I mean, it is. He's capable of doing it, but I don't think he's best maximized as a player like that. He's best maximized when he can get the ball and just worry about putting it in the basket, because he is a far better scorer than he is a playmaker. And he's a damn good playmaker, but you're looking at a dude who's averaging like 25, 26 points a night, and do you want them to be able to do that unobstructed?